Hi, everybody. How are you today? Kathy Hansen here. Sure wish I could be doing with this in person with you, but I'm thankful at least I can connect with you this way today to share with you some really cool pencil art techniques that are going to add interest and hopefully dimension to all your pencil art designs. So much to go over where to start. I guess I'm going to start with the basics. First of all, one quick easy tip is utilize the right pencil tip for the intended mark you want to make. There's a point, a rounded point, and a blunt point. Rounded points, obviously, hand position, are meant for tight detail lines. A rounded tip is what you would usually use to fill in an area because more pigment hits the paper because there's more exposed when it's in a round tip as opposed to a sharp tip. Another thing they'll notice, where's my hand when I'm doing this? If I were to hold that same tight handwriting position, first of all, it's going to be a lot darker because more pressure is being applied. But secondly, do you see how much longer it is taking me to fill it in doing slightly overlapping strokes? The third point is a blunt point. It also will effortlessly fill areas in because there is a lot of pigment exposed. Again, darker than a rounded one. It will also make wider lines than even a rounded tip, but especially wider than when you're holding it in the handwriting position for a sharp point. All right, which one? I'm going to work off my rounded one for you guys right now. Going back to where I position my hand, handwriting position is going to do, obviously, the most controlled line. Now let's go back a little bit more. You're going to notice it's going to get a little lighter and a little thinner. If I go right in the middle where it says General Pencil Company, it's going to be even a little bit lighter and thinner. Now let's go back, way back here where it says Kimberly. This is the Kimberly Graphite Pencil by General Pencil. It's the one, my pencil of choice for graphite. Way back here, not only thinner, but also lighter and looser. So remember to utilize the whole width of your pencil when you are working, whether it's in an underhand position, even an overhand position. It's going to be much looser and darker. Work your way there. You see, it's getting looser and looser, and indirectly, it's going to create a lot of loose effects, which are great if you're doing foliage, roughage, anything like that. So that's the first thing I kind of wanted to go over. Since I've got a Kimberly graphite pencil in my hand, just want to touch base on, they have 20 degrees in this artist grade pigment pencil. You can never go wrong when you are using artist grade pigment. This is what you're going to get. The pencil is mostly pigment, just enough filler to secure the core. If you drop down to student grade or inexpensive pencils, you're not going to have near the graphite to work with or charcoal, and therefore you're not going to have as many manipulation options with it, which you're going to see in about 10 more minutes when I start expanding on all this. The reason I wanted to talk about their degrees, they have 1 degree pencil no one else has. It is their 9XXB. Most graphite pencils, even when you have an 8 or 9B and you're getting it as dark as you can, you still fight a little bit of shine from graphite. This is a specialty formula pencil that they have managed to create a flat, matte, black, almost graphite, which is so awesome when you really want to punch a lot of color in. Here's an example of it. Look at the head in that chickadee and the small areas that I punched a little more of that 9XXB. It just sets it. It adds punch. It adds effect. I could go on and on and on. It is an awesome pencil. Now we're going to flip over to charcoal a little bit. I'm sure you're all aware of General's charcoal, HB2B, 4B, 6B. This is the one we're going to kind of play around with first. I am going to be working with the 4B for starters. I want to lay that in for you. Obviously hand positioning, how light or dark you're going to make it, how much pressure. But even at its darkest, to us that's dark, right? Well, General also has their Euroblend Primo charcoal pencils. These come in HBB 3B, obviously hard, medium, soft. They are so creamy. I'm going to use the equivalent to about a 4B, which would be the B. You don't have to build up. Look what instantly you get when you draw with that pencil. You can use them alone or hand in hand with the traditional orange charcoal. But watch, even when I come in and pop a little bit of this over that, do you see how much darker that is even? And in all actuality, if you were looking at what I was looking at, this is a warmer black, this is a cooler black. Now we can even, excuse me, combine temperature as well as value when we're working in charcoal, which is pretty darn cool. Another cool thing about the Primo, because it's so creamy and saturates the paper, you can really manipulate it if you work with a soft hair brush. This is a Camel brush. Dynasty makes it. It's an IPC2. But watch how I can just grab the edge of that, start pulling that out. Just keep dragging and dragging and dragging. What a difference that makes, right? I can also manipulate traditional charcoal, but you notice it doesn't have as much of a punch to it. So I really wanted to talk a few seconds about the Primo pencils. You're all familiar with our charcoal white pencil. I just wanted to make you aware of the fact that Primo also has a white pencil too in that same creamy formula. So a creamy white will be laid over a creamy black as opposed to more traditional charcoal with the charcoal white laid on it. They're meant to work together. All right, so I talked a little bit about actual drawing with the pencil. We all know how to make marks like hatch, cross hatch, overlapping large circles, overlapping small circles to make something look fluffier, uh, movement marks. These are a lot of traditional marks that students of all ages and ability will incorporate into their work. But I want to start doing some fun, really cool, exciting things that I call the unexpected mark. To me, that's what makes your work so much more interesting, is as they're, looking at it, all of a sudden they stop and go, what? How did they do that right there? So these are some of the fun things I want to share with you. I'm going to be doing in charcoal because it shows up really good on the screen, but we also could do this in graphite or pastel pencils. So I have a 2B and a 4B here. The harder the harder the degree of the pencil, the more distinct these unique patterns are going to be because the particles are denser, for lack of a better word. The softer the pencil, it's going to be a little more airy. So I'm going to start with my 2B and a sanding paddle, and I'm just going to grate 2 little piles of pigment right off of my pencil. Now, I'm going to take something like a cotton ball, and I'm going to pretend I'm twisting off a bottle cap. Just soft motion. This is fairly soft, so the mark it makes, the value is going to be a little bit lighter because this is going to absorb some of those particles. So let's twist off that bottle cap and look at that cool design we got. Now I'm going to take an extra soft white vinyl ES2 eraser by General Pencil, my eraser of choice, because it will effortlessly erase all mediums, charcoal, graphite, pastel, whatever. You know you have a good eraser when you can just go like this. You don't have to go back and forth. Yes, that's how beautiful this erases. Look at this. When you can effortlessly erase and not have to go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, you know you not only have a good eraser, but you know there's less chance you will ever, the surface integrity of your paper will ever get compromised because it's not abrasive. A lot of people use really, really hard erasers, And once you've compromised the paper, all additional pigments seem to grab, or it almost looks like a skin knee or something. So, you know, it's a simple little tool, but it's so important to pick the right one. So sorry, I digressed. I'm gonna twist off that same bottle top with this. Now this is denser, so the pattern will be more obvious and distinct. So twisting off my bottle cap. Look at the difference. That for starters, couldn't you see that as real loose flowers in a field around things, or a tea rose that you could further come in with your pencil tip and add more details or whatever. To me, it's a super exciting mark. Another thing about that extra soft white vinyl eraser, right now I see I got a lot of pigment on this. You can stamp with this too. Right now I've got pigment on it, but you could even do markers, paint, whatever. Stamp your design, and then I'll show you it's self-cleaning. So sometimes, let's say that was a brick or something. Let me pull that up close. It is not the final brick, but man, that is an awesome springboard for the students to then, further develop. Or let's say we have bricks in the foreground and bricks in the background. What a great way to make a really soft uh, brick way in the background. Now, as I said, this is self-cleaning, so I am going to just erase with it. Another thing I could do, and I'll add that right on top of these bricks, is over here, I'm just going to grate some more pigment. And I can actually just lightly, because you don't want to smush it, I can lightly pick up a lot of that pigment and transfer it. And now I've got that design. Let's put that right there, or even inside that brick, like I said. How cool is that? That's also really neat. Let's say in the center of a flower or something, especially like a sunflower or something. The objective today is just to get your minds ticking and thinking, oh, I never thought of that. Well, if it'll do that, what else could it possibly do? I'm always experimenting. Some marks I love, some marks I hate, but you never know until you try. So I'm looking at this going, well, I wonder what would happen if I maybe, did something like this, or kind of pulled it or smeared it. See what I'm saying? So many unique marks to build off of that are either suggesting movement or something soft or textured. So there's a few right off the bat, just working with this little eraser right here. I'm going to clean that again. Let's grate some more pigment and see what else we can come up with. How about taking a paper tortilla? Look at all those ridges. I bet this would make a cool palm tree or something. Some cool marks within the trunk of a palm tree. Again, by itself, come in a little bit more and darken working with this, or just hop back and work with that pencil tip again. These are great ways to have springboards to further develop areas of interest, things people aren't expecting. So let's grade another one. We know a tortillon will do that. How about a room key? Let's see what a room key will do. I'm going to do that same slide. More pressure. Therefore, it gave a totally different look. And I actually used the same pigment and the same motion. The tools that you try to manipulate your pigments with are going to make all the difference in the world. You can lay some down, and if you want to soften it out for a background or whatever, again, a cotton ball, lightly. Now, if you even put a little pressure, it might embed some of those particles. What a great way to fill in. You don't have to have your powders if you want to do a great toning in a background. Q-tips. Always trying to think of something that I could grab right within my house. Now notice the Q-tip value is darker because it's denser than the cotton ball. Now let's take a makeup sponge. Color is even going to be darker, and it will probably show some of the pigment particles too, because it might push them into the paper. See the difference in those three just by the tool I used. Now I want to grate some pigment and use templates so you can get some really cool designs. Okay. This is drywall tape, and when I pulled it off, it changed its shape. I don't know, I think that's kind of cool. I could manipulate my pigment two ways. I could grate it right on top of this and manipulate it, or if I want it softer, what I do is I grate the pigment first off into a little piece of foil, and then I can pick it up with a brush. If I pick it up with that IPC2 flat blend brush, this is really good if you want to draw with it. So let's say I wanted to draw some limbs or something. I am in total control. I can draw something with it. And this is what I meant by the limbs. Let's go back to the chickadee. The foreground limbs I did with the pencil tip, and I worked with my pen style eraser to lift out the snow. But these way in the background, I did with this brush because I wanted to communicate they were way, way, way far away. And obviously you can see I graded some of that pigment and used a cotton ball to make this background. The areas that are darker, I might have done with that makeup sponge instead of the cotton ball, or I might have come back, reloaded the cotton ball, and just put a second application of the pigment down for the darker areas. Hope you guys are finding this interesting. You know, I always want everyone to leave with something new in their arsenal. This is a number 8 flat acrylic brush. Obviously, has seen better days, but instead of throwing it in the garbage, this makes a great pounce brush, guys. So I'm going to load it with pigment. I'm just loading it up. Yeah, you can see. And then how light or dark the value will be how much pigment you have on the brush and how hard you pounce with it. I got way too much there. I'm going to just dabble some of that off. Now I'm going to do a lighter touch so you can see the different values that you can create in an area. Isn't that kind of cool? Now, another thing great about that ES20, it acts like a kneaded eraser. It will partially lift pigment if you want. How hard you press will determine how much pigment is lifted off. For instance, I'm going to press hard because this is a dark area. Took almost all of it out, but it did still leave that cool design pattern. So, and now I got that design pattern here. Let's see if it will transfer. Yes, it did. I hope you picked that up. A very, very, very light version of that, just the reverse. Sometimes you can make a pattern within a pattern too, all the same value, or, you know, use different amount of pressures, but sometimes it's fun for people to realize the longer that they look at something you've done and say, oh my gosh, there is a pattern within a pattern in that area. Again, it's things like this that are going to make the viewer linger a little longer in your work, but also it's what establishes your work, your style. What can I show you next? I showed you the drywall tape. Let me pop pages over. I used to hand draw all my lace, and then one day I was in the craft store and I was like, oh my gosh, they have some really nice paper doily versions of lace patterns. I'm going to go home and see if I can recreate that in less steps. So again, I could grate the pigment right off my pencil onto the paper and do what we're going to do. But especially right now, remember when you want something very loose and soft, cotton ball or brush is my choice for applying this pigment. You actually could leave it alone when it's all done, or come back with a brush and add additional values within each one of those lace openings. It depends how detailed you want it to look. I can continue to brush out the edge with my brush, or I can use my cotton ball. Probably could use a Kleenex too if you so chose. And then soften that edge out to nothing. Voila. I accomplished so many cool effects so much quicker now that I've learned all these fun little cheats for you guys. Here's a few other specialty papers. See the different, you have a lot of design choices. Things like this I love to use in the background of a mixed media, or if I want a pattern within an element in one of my drawings or paintings. So this time I'll just grate it on and we'll pounce it through. Sometimes it's nice to have it pre-grated, and sometimes if you're afraid it's going to spill or it's windy and you're outside or something, then grating is a good option as well. Grating will be darker and will sometimes transfer some of those particles. So you're not only going to get a pattern, you're going to get a little texture in that pattern. What do you think of that? Is your mind starting to tick, guys? Are you starting to say, oh, maybe I could do this or this or this or this or this? See, look at some of these other cool patterns that I've picked up. I actually go into a lot of the stores in the back where they have their specialty paper drawers and say, by any chance, do you have any damaged papers? And lots of times they do, and they will give them to you for a song. All right, this is not only have a cool pattern, but there's also fibers in this. Let me see if it'll pick up the fibers. And I thought, wow, wouldn't it be awesome if I could find a way to transfer these fibers as well into my design? So, same thing, grate the pigment and load it up with the pigment. I'm off screen, but I'm just loading this with it. And then I'm going to lay it down. And I'm going to take a metal soup spoon or tablespoon, lay it on top of it. The powder side is down. And I am going to burnish it, and hopefully it will transfer not only the openings, but the string pattern. And yes, it did. I love to use this when in a lot of where all the trees are in the background and you just see hit and miss areas of all the limbs and everything. Here is an example of that in action. All those trees way in the background have all those little fibers in them, and the foreground trees are real distinct. What else can I show you? Stencils. Oh my gosh. Again, look at all the patterns available in stencils nowadays. Maybe we'll do these two because haven't done them in a while. Now, again, when I do a stencil, I like to do hit and miss. Alter my pressure so some is darker and some is lighter. I also feel that adds more interest if it's not just solid. Solid design, same here I'm trying to do the same amount there so you'll see the difference. See how much more interesting when you have dark and light areas, even when you are utilizing stencils in a design. Sometimes you just want a pattern. Sometimes you want something just peeking out the background. I like to put this in the background and then actually draw a beautiful flower or something in front of it. So just trying to throw all kinds of fun examples out there. That's why I call this, you want me to do what with that pencil? Because so many times as I've instructed this, that's what people say to me, like, what? So hence that's how the title came. And again, notice several values in this as well. Again, if it was too dark, take a cleaning ES20 or your kneaded eraser, lay it down and lift up a little bit. Lay it down, lift up a little bit. Now, a lot of these patterns that I've shown you, because it was just brushed on, they're truly not adhered to the paper. So you have a good chance they're going to smear. So there you have several options so they don't smear. But then again, look, I kind of like that. What if I wanted more than one value? I could turn around and take, again, a mop brush. Look how I have changed that to suddenly there's a design within a background that was toned. Tick, 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 tick. I hope your minds are just going. All right, getting back to what I just said. So it is not permanent. You can use spray fixative. You can use hairspray, which I hate when people do that, but sometimes that's all they have. Here's another way. And the pH of your paper will never be compromised if you do this. Tissue paper. There is shiny. I hope it's picking up the shine. There's a shiny side and a dull absorbent side on a lot of the paper in the dollar stores or craft stores anymore. You want the dull absorbent side down. You are going to lay it down over your work. And again, you're going to burnish it. All a smear is excess pigment sitting on the top of the paper that the paper just can't absorb. There's nowhere for it to go, so it sits on top of that paper. So by burnishing it, what we are doing is pushing as many particles into the paper as possible, and what the paper can't absorb, the tissue paper will. And then you won't have a smear. You also do not throw these away. I will turn around and either use this as collage paper down the road because that pattern really is visible. I don't know if it's picking it up here, but it is visible. If it was darker than that, sometimes I can even flip it over and transfer it back on, and I would have that exact design. I don't think there's enough to transfer, but I wanted to let you know. Oh, it was. I have that exact same muted design that I could repeat way in the background if I so chose. Whereas if I tried to imitate it with my pencil, do you know how hard it would be to get it that light, that diffused, kind of wispy and airy? So save them. They're great to use in mixed media too, because then right off the bat in that background, you have a lot of subtle images. So I will use this paper over and over and over again. What else can I show you? I know what I'm going to do, and I've got it right here. I have figured out how to paint with charcoal or graphite. And what I do, I mean, this was a hard one to figure out because if you're working on mixed media paper, any paper that can handle a lot of moisture, you can just use any type of odorless turp to dissolve your pigment. So here's some pigment. You do not want to use a nice watercolor brush when you do this. You want to use a flat acrylic brush. Let me grab one. I didn't have one because your watercolor brushes, the rubbing alcohol can tend to dry out. So this is rubbing alcohol, comes in 70 and 91%. You can use either. 70 is going to be bolder than 91. And I'm just loading my brush. And I am now turning this into a liquid. And I can now paint with my charcoal or graphite. I'm going to make those hairs a little loose. Here's another way to get some texture in a tree or something. Excuse me, I'm so sorry. That I would, once it dried, come back with my pencil and further develop it. Once I realized I could liquefy it, then I was like, oh, I bet I could stamp with it. So again, try to find inexpensive things since, we all have budgets. can only spend so much. We always can't have everything we want. So work with what you do have. This is just some bubble wrap. I can turn around and stamp with it and create a totally different pattern. It actually has a painterly feel to it. The reason the rubbing alcohol works well on thin paper is it evaporates after it's been on there a few seconds. What you have to worry about with this, or not worry, be aware of, is again, we brushed it on. This should be burnished afterwards as well. Cheap tin foil. Look at the pattern we got in that cheap tin foil. I'm going to pour a little out. Let's see what kind of pattern we can make with this. Again, do I like everything I try? No. But by willing to experiment, you look at all the cool things you're going to find as, during the journey. So I'm going to lay it down and lift it up. Look at that mark, just from a piece of tin foil. You can also cheesecloth. Cheesecloth is really cool. Keep the original pattern or change it to whatever string pattern you want, and then kind of lay it down in your liquid. Now, when you pick it up, if it's super saturated, it's going to kind of make a mark like a tire track. If you lay it down and then take a piece of wax paper, tin foil, whatever, gently press down on it, you will repeat the distinct string pattern and get a look like that. All right, I am a ways into this, so I am going to stop and hit on a few other really cool pencils and techniques in other mediums. Before I go to water-soluble graphite, though, I do want to take a few seconds and talk about sticks, because I personally love to utilize my sticks and my pencils together, because you are going to see they make total different marks. Let's get some graphite out here. Obviously, right out of the package, you have this end to work on, this edge to work on, this edge to work on, this edge to work on, this side to work on. Right off the bat. Now this is the smaller version. It's easier to sharpen the small sticks. Let's sharpen the tip. A sharpened tip is going to lay off a wider mark than if you were to do it with a pencil. But again, you do see this is darker, crisper, more precise. It's all about getting different values, different widths within anything you're doing. Here's another thing. When I break my sticks, I used to get so bummed. I don't anymore. I've got 4 corners to work off of. So let's just let those 4 corners hit the paper. You are not controlling it. You're just going, where are they going to go? What are they going to do? I love that it's so loose, and it's not as controlled as if you were to try to imitate that with the pencil tip holding it. This is a different one. Everyone is going to make different marks because the 4 corners are totally different. I love doing this when I'm doing desert scenes or scruffy grasses. They would not be very tight and controlled. Much looser. To me, this even communicates nature. Doesn't mean I can't come back with my pencil tip then and throw more controlled ones in places. But you see how that just builds it up, and it's so much more interesting for the eye to look at and question. I do the same thing with my pastel sticks. Pastels, first of all, generals are all handmade. So if you get one that is kind of killywampus and a little bent, that's not a bad thing. These are all still hand laid and hand stamped. They hand stamp everything. When they say that their products are handcrafted, they really, really mean it. But you're going to notice that when you get it right out of the box, it's going to lay off light. If you sharpen it, it's going to lay a lot more pigment off because you've removed that outer coating that has a stick lay off much lighter. So again, you can work with these in a lot of ways. I grate these a lot too, guys. When I want to fill in a large area, I'll just grate my sticks and manipulate them any way I want to get beautiful tonal backgrounds when I'm working with pastel. That was a really dark one. I'm also going to grab a pastel stick to show, or excuse me, pastel pencil to show you. I'm going to take this outer piece of sandpaper off because I'm going to color. Same thing here. There's so much pigment in their pastel pencils that I not only can draw with them and effortlessly fill in an area, I can manipulate them for backgrounds. All kinds of fun stuff. That actually was off of the screen, but I'm going to show you an actual finished one so you can see what I mean. See that a soft background? That was all done just by grading that pastel pencil. But then look, you also, when you have, I'm going to hopefully zone in, you can create artwork by blocking color in or also just creating elements just with lines. They are so versatile and you can build up a design almost effortlessly because they're so highly pigmented. I also noticed that that was done with pencil. This is done with sticks. I find I work a lot looser when I have sticks in my hands too, especially if I just want to give the illusion of something. So sometimes it's fun to mix it up and work with your sticks alone or your sticks and pencils combined. Obviously, that pencil tip is wonderful when you are working in tight, tight little areas. Another thing I love about their pencils is all those values that are within here. There's no mud. No mud. All right, let me focus in again. All fresh, crisp colors because you won't find hidden compliments. Okay, what else? What else before I change over? Do want to talk a few seconds more about erasers. Here's an example. This started out a sheet that I use all the time when I am showing eraser effects, but look at that cool pattern. I mean, this in itself you could turn into something. If you have extracted too much pigment, remember you can either come back with a cotton ball or something, smush it to not make it as distinct, or if you still have some left in your brush, guys, you can knock back something that's brighter than you want. And you can do a lot of fun stuff working with your erasers. It's fun to do eraser exercises. This was totally toned, and I made everyone lift out using different erasers this design. Value control was all established first with the erasers, and I hope it'll pick this up. But even when this was done, you're going to see there's even little white lines that are lighter in each one of these bricks. Here's one that you can really see it on. Then the first lights that we pulled the pigment out to establish the bricks. So, do all kinds of experimentation with your tools. Really get to know them, push them to see how far you can take them. I showed you the ES20, just stamp something out, remove a little, or how it effortlessly erases. A black 18, I think it's called a GBS 18, is another one. This was actually created if you are erasing on toned paper or dark paper. White erasers can sometimes leave a ghost mark. This won't. This was made for erasing on mattes or toned papers. But again, effortlessly will erase. And how light or dark will depend on the value it erases. You can always You can always erase less. You cannot erase more. And I knew this was going too smoothly. I just spilled my rubbing alcohol, so you got to give me 1 second. I'll talk as I'm cleaning up the rubbing alcohol. General actually has a great eraser reference guide. My email address is kathihanson@gmail.com. And feel free to email me, and I will shoot you off an electronic version of it. It not only tells you what the eraser is made of, its uses, but also the best surfaces it's compatible with, the best mediums it's compatible with. Excuse me. It's invaluable. It really is invaluable, and I will gladly share it with you all. So that is a black 18. Sometimes very, very aggressive graphite. And what I mean by that is you have a lot of layers, you've got a heavy hand, and you want to extract some. Sometimes an extra soft white vinyl eraser is just not strong enough for those aggressive marks. That's when you turn to plastic. But you don't want hard plastic, you want dense plastic. The P12, it comes in 3 different sizes. This is what I use for my dark, 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 aggressive graphite. This will also erase graphite lines off of wood if you ever are designing in wood. Last but not least, this is what I was talking about, my pen eraser. It has this long little eraser core, and it's fairly thick in diameter. If you want to make it thinner, you can cut it, but what I always do is I just sort of like lay it on its side and erase on one side, and then I will flip it over and erase on the other side. And right now I have created this chisel edge. If I want a super skinny tip, then I would just do all 4 sides. So you can change the diameter in this. Super easy. And again, what I like about this, yes, my ES20 or whatever will remove. Well, first of all, I've worn down those crisp edges, so I'm not going to get as thin of a line. But I also, my field of vision is blocked by this, whereas nothing is blocking me right now with this little guy. And I can do all different sizes and shapes almost effortlessly, lifting out with this. Again, that's how I lifted out a lot of the feather lines in the body with this. All right, I am going to move over and just talk a little bit about a few other specialty pencils, and then 2 water soluble at the very end. A drafting pencil. You don't use it that often, but I'm going to tell you, if you have a project where you are doing repetitive lines over and over and over again, and you want them the same width and value, the sole purpose of this pencil tip is to work for long extended periods of time before the tip changes. Okay, so that's a handy dandy one to have. And a good old-fashioned ebony layout pencil. If you're going to go outside sketching or whatever, you have limited room and limited supplies, you cannot go wrong with the layout. Our extra black, this is our ebony graphite pencil. It is capable of creating light, super dark values all in one pencil. It's great for outdoor sketching, journaling. Another tip, if you like to document a lot of your drawings when you're out and about. So I didn't even know this. So many people have told me, I love the fact yours doesn't smear as much as the other ebony brands. So I like to share that little tip and trick with you all too. We also have a carbon sketch pencil. It is smooth like graphite, bold like charcoal. So almost looks like charcoal. Almost looks like charcoal, but if you don't have a 9XXB and you are looking to get a super, super dark within your graphite, this is the way to go. Another cool thing about this, though, is it is not totally water soluble, but the top layer will dissolve if it comes into contact with moisture. The under layers are going to be stationary. You are still going to have that sharp line. But look how you can add a little tonal stuff around this if you really, really wanted to. When it dries, it is permanent. It is not going to erase on you, thus making it a really, really, really cool tool to use in your mixed media designs as well. You know, got to be thinking all this cool stuff. All right, now I'm going to switch over to watercolor paper and share with you a little bit of water-soluble techniques. Okay, we'll grab these two pieces right off the bat. I got to hop away for one quick second and grab Did you think I disappeared? I had to go grab some paper towel. I had my paper towel right here ready, and I had to clean up my spilt rubbing alcohol with it. I do want to share one more thing. I just noticed I put this out for a reason. This is colored pencil. This black GBS 18 eraser will erase 99% colored pencil. You're going to have a ghost mark from the very first layer because it's a staining pigment, but I mean, that's all that's going to be noticed. This erases colored pencil for you guys. Okay, sketch and wash, water-soluble graphite. In its dry state, it is totally erasable, and you can even use it hand in hand with your regular graphite. Not going to make a difference. When water comes into contact with it and all the lines dissolve, you are painting with liquid graphite. And I'm going to show it to you several ways because you don't have to dissolve all of it. Again, lots of different ways you can manipulate this. You can draw the design first with graphite. I tend to use a 2H because I never have to worry about any loose pigment interacting with the water and, you know, muddying it up. Or you can totally draw the outline with the sketch and wash. If you do this, though, you want hit and miss lines. Otherwise, you're going to have the exact same value all the way around this pair. And as you know, the same value all the way around and it's going to flatten it right out. So all we're trying to do is establish values right now. The white of the paper is going to be my lightest value. And then my darks and my midtones are going to be, you know, I don't go all the way to the edge because it's not supposed to be as dark at the very edge. And you can always put more. Let's say, for example, this isn't as dark as I want. When I finish this, I'm going to show you. Once it's dry, I can put a second layer on. The previous layer is not going to reactivate and lift. So less is more. We're going to go with this much. This is barely making contact. That's going to give a light value. For a medium value, which is about what I had, you know, press harder, you layer more. For a really dark one, you would layer several layers. And I'm going to show you that first. You're in control totally of the value. So here's, look at all those lines dissolve. Light, medium, dark. Isn't that awesome? So when you activate this, you got to have that painting theory is going to come into play. I always wet the lightest area first. And even though I don't have medium values here, this is going to actually create medium values too because the existing water in that light paper area is going to dilute. So I kind of do my light area first. Then I start activating this. You're going to see it's going to get lighter and lighter when it starts wicking up into that wet area. And then I'm going to come back in, go down here. Now, I've dissolved all the particles here. Towards the top, I'm going to get in and get out. Now, if I have too much in my brush, I just take that excess off if I want to come back and break up that solid value line. Now I'm going to get to the top. If you get in and out, you're actually going to leave some of those particles showing. And actually, in a lot of pairs, there are little pock marks. So you'll be able to see when this dries some of those pock marks too. Okay, look at all those values I established right off the bat. Now, this is still really wet and shiny. I don't necessarily have to wait till it dries to come in and put more. Pretend this is a second piece of paper. I can load my brush right up with this and come in right now when it's wet and drop some more colors in areas if I chose to. Actually, I want to pull this down a little bit now that I've got it facing me. In its wet state, you can manipulate this further until it dries. If you were to draw on the dry paper, you're going to get a light line. If you draw on it when it's wet, oops, notice I almost used my dry pencil. I have a second one here that has a flag on it. When I am going into wet, I always use a different one. Look how bold that pigment is because it wetted and it's dissolving it right off that core, and the color is going to be darker. If I want to just start drawing with it again, I would have to wait till this dried to not get that dark mark. So I always have my wet and my dry ones. So I can just keep going right away. Here is that example I said I'd share with you. I can draw and wet additional pigment. I wet real far back so it just has all the room in the world to travel because, again, it's not going to reactivate. And then I start activating that area. So you can build layer after layer after layer using that Sketch and Wash pencil. And when it's totally dry, again, because it won't reactivate, you can put watercolor pencil over it. You're almost going to get like a watercolor grisaille effect because General's Kimberly watercolor pencils are a true semi-transparent pigment. True semi-transparent. So they allow the previous layer to filter through. And I'm going to wet here because I know it's not going to reactivate. Look, here, I'll let it extend out. Look at that gorgeous pigment. All the lines dissolve when you use their watercolor pencils. And it's gorgeous, gorgeous, semi-transparent watercolor. And let me throw a few more colors in there so you can effortlessly see how all these lines dissolve and you have this gorgeous, gorgeous pigment. And again, when they dry too, they might, you can slightly lift them if you reactivate them, but they are not, you're not going to lose all that color. It's not all going to reactivate and move around. Here's another fun tip and trick to share with you regarding the watercolor pencils. Pastels go beautifully over them once they dry too. This is a little bit of orange pastel on top of the dried watercolor pencil. I love putting them all hand in hand. If I choose, because their pencils are so highly pigmented, if you draw on wet paper just like the Sketch and Wash, all you're going to do is get bold lines of color. It's great. It looks like you loaded a liner brush and put those colors in. But if you're looking to do soft skies, fields, whatever, that's just not going to work. So what you can do instead, because they're so pigmented, is this is a piece of 90-pound watercolor paper. You can tell I've used some. Once they dry, I just draw additional color on top of that area, and I can use this over and over and over again. And this is how I can do an entire watercolor painting with my pencils. So I'm going to get a sanding block ready again because I'm going to do some grating with this too. And let's say this is my sky. Oh, interesting. I wonder what the sizing is on this guy. Now I'm super wetting it and it wants to sit up. I could have grabbed another piece of paper, but curious Kathy wants to know what it's going to look like and do, so we're going to go with it. All right, now I'm going to activate some of this pigment. Okay, I don't have a lot on this one. I thought I reloaded it, but I'm still going to go with it. This is going to be a very light value because I'm going to be grading, but look, I can create new colors, blue greens. I could make it super bold if I chose to. Your range is crazy with this. All right, I'm going to stop real quick because it's starting to dry. I'm going to do that same grading technique. This time I'm going to do it with the watercolor pencil. Let's get some bricks or tiny little rocks in this field. This is a field. So let's make that. That in itself is so much more interesting. I could leave it alone and come back and draw grasses, but here's a fun trick. While it's still wet, take all the water out of your brush, pinch it so it looks like a fan, and lightly make contact and with these particles because you want some of the particles still showing, but you want to pull some of them up. So it looks like we have some scruffy grass happening in a few areas. Don't get carried away because we want the pencil tip to come back and create more distinct grasses. Okay. If I wait till it dries, I will get very, very soft lines. If I draw them while it's wet, I got to sharpen this. They are going to be bolder, which I want some bold and some light, so I'm going to do some of both. The wetter the paper, the wider the line is going to be. And they might even blend out a little bit more on you. You want them different shapes and sizes. And again, don't go overboard because if I come in once this dries and create more, they are going to be thinner, softer, and a lighter value, which is going to add additional depth in those areas. If your tips break off, don't throw them in the garbage. You can take 3 or 4 tips. Well, actually, no, you can take as many tips as you want. The more tips, the darker the color is going to be. Just put it in a little old spray bottle, and it's going to take a few days for it to dissolve. But then you can come back and let's say we want to spray our skies in or water or spray over a stencil. You know, dun 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 dun. Is your mind ticking? I'm going to show you what I mean by that. Here's a background that I sprayed multiple colors through a stencil on. And then palette technique for the first soft colors, draw and wet in the tight, distinct areas. Another paper doily sprayed on as my background in this design. That was a paper doily, so the pattern was very distinct. I hope it picks this up. This is a real piece of lace, cotton thick, heavy lace. So your pattern is much softer and more subdued. Real lace lent itself so much more to the background on this calla lily because I wanted the whole thing very, 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 very soft. I love buying all the techniques together. Obviously, you can see a little sprayed sky. You can see palette color dropped in here. Draw and wet color is going to be much more distinct, and the color is going to be much more saturated because it's coming right off that pencil tip. Whereas when you use the palette, you're already lightening the color and diluting it because of the water in the brush. Okay, one last thing I almost forgot to show you. Remember when I worked with the Primo charcoal, traditional charcoal, and then the Primo was the creamier, right? It's not only creamier, because it's so creamy, you can use it on more than just paper. This was done on a piece of leather, okay? And again, no smear. I used that tissue paper because I didn't have the option of using a fixative because it would have stained the leather. Do you notice some of the whites are much brighter than the rest? Well, here's how I did that, boys and girls. Again, this should be your first clue. What does one of the pencils have on it? A flag. I put this down because black matte Primo charcoal. Look, when I say it's bold black and saturate your paper, I am not exaggerating. So getting back to my charcoal white pencil, this is what we use to build up white straw whites. You know, it's going to give me a light white on my skin. The one I wet is my flagged one. Now, I've been flagging this and dipping this for at least a year now. Eventually, every time I go to sharpen it, it's going to break because all that water is wicking up that core, and eventually it's going to compromise it. But look what it does when it's wet. And if you pop a bright white on top of your dry white you've built up, it's just going to add so much more interest. I do it a lot, reflections in glass, a little twinkle in the eye, or, you know, a little moisture effect on a lip or something. You can do so many cool things with this. And also, if you accidentally filled in the whole white of your paper when you are doing a watercolor, I don't know if it's going to do it because this is still wet, but when you put this back in, do you see it soaking into the paper? It truly is going to soak 100% back into that paper, and you're not even going to know that the original white of the paper, or that it's not the original white of the paper. Whereas if you used a gouache or something, you would have a hard line and it's going to sit raised up on top of it. This is going to soak right back down into that paper for you. Again, or I can just put a bold area somewhere. All right, cough, cough. That is my cue to say my hour is up. I so enjoyed this time with you. My hopes and dreams are you walked away excited with a few new tips and techniques to share with others or incorporate in your own work. If you love watching videos of product in action, please visit General Pencil's website. They have so many cool videos of, you know, just short tutorials of showing a pencil how it works and filling you and giving you the nitty gritty details for you to know if that's a pencil you think you might like. Some of them are actually long videos of projects, of artists working with the product. And some of my favorites are visits to the factory. You actually get a glimpse into the pencil factory and can see all these wonderful pencils being created. So go to www.generalpencil.com. Also, hope you visit my website, kathyhanson.com, KathyHanson.com, where I have all kinds of fun little tutorials and things available for you as well. For art teachers, we offer professional development classes free of no charge. Feel free to reach out through my email again that I gave you, KathyHanson@gmail.com. We also are going to be celebrating artists and doing all kinds of free Zoom events. If you would like to be on the email list that we're going to shoot out blasts, the dates, times, and things we're going to be doing, again, feel free to reach out to me through my email address. Have a wonderful day. Create often.